Hello, Anika. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Should we start now for a minute to let more people join? Okay, I think we have all. So I think we can start now. Once again, good day to everyone, and I welcome you all to the 10th edition of the Nigeria Internet Governance Forum 2021. And I would especially like to welcome everyone to this panel session on the sub-theme accessibility. My name is Bukola Oronti, representing Internet Society Nigeria chapter, and I'll be the moderator for this panel discussion. Just before I introduce my panelists, I'll briefly want to read out the housekeeping rules for this session. One, the question and comments should be submitted in the chat room, as this will be read out during the Q&A period. And also, we all are encouraged to adhere to the NIGF Code of Conduct that is guiding our activities and interaction at this event. Now, without further ado, let me introduce to all our team of panelists, and I'll be starting in no particular order. I'll start with Mr. Fagani Tambiok. He is the head of connectivity sub-Saharan Africa at Facebook. Also, I'll be introducing Mrs. Bumi Durowoju. She is a senior business development manager for Emerging Market AI and Intelligent Cloud Airband Initiative at Microsoft. Also, I have with me here Mrs. Bonika Makwakwa. She is the regional coordinator Africa Alliance for Affordable Internet at World Web Foundation. She is also the convener for Africa Summit on Women and Girls in Technology. Also on the panel is Dr. Adewale Adedokun. He's the country coordinator for Nigeria Network Operators Group, NGNOG. He is also one of the current directors on Afrinic board, representing West Africa. And finally, on my list of panelists is Mr. Namego Obiora. He's representing Mr. Clement Umeri. He's the General Manager for Information Technology Services at Nikon CERT. And without much ado, I want to yield the floor to Mr. Fagani. I want him to start by sharing with us his thoughts on the sub-theme accessibility, considering the main theme, internet that works for all. So now I yield the floor to you, Mr. Fagani, your opening statement and thoughts on accessibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Bukola. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And Facebook is really grateful to the Nigeria IGF for giving us this platform and this opportunity to take part in these very important discussions. So I think from our perspective, and I guess it's what we've heard throughout the morning sessions, is that it's clear that the COVID-19 pandemic has really highlighted the critical nature of access to fast and affordable internet connectivity. Like Nena said in her session or during her comments, the internet is no longer a luxury, it's no longer something that's just good to have. it has become a basic necessity for all Nigerians, for all Africans, and for everybody in the world, whether working, studying from home, running a business, connecting with friends and family. We've been able as Nigerians, as Africans, to leverage the internet to do all of this, even during a time when we're not able to do this in person or physically. And what that means is that things will never go back to the way they were before the pandemic. So post-pandemic, things will change. The pandemic has really accelerated Nigeria and the rest of the world to a situation or to a paradigm shift where people will rely more on the internet for economic and social activities. But despite this trend, we still in a context, or we're still in a scenario where millions of Nigerians still do not have access to the internet, or if they do, they're not able to use the internet meaningfully. We have two main categories, if you may. We have millions of Nigerians living in rural areas, and these rural areas do not have access to high-speed broadband networks. Or we have millions of low-income Nigerians where they might be living in areas where they can access this 4G high-speed connectivity, but they cannot afford to do so in a meaningful or sustainable manner. And what that means is, as a community, as an ecosystem, we need to come together and put in place and work collaboratively to ensure that all Nigerians can use and derive value from the internet. I think as a first step, it's important that government sets out ambitious targets, and we have to give credit to the Nigerian government because they've actually done this with their recent Nigeria National Broadband Plan 2025, where they've set out quite ambitious connectivity goals for the entire country. But our work doesn't stop there. We need to now work with government, as stakeholders, as private sector, civil society, public institutions, to put in place the appropriate frameworks or the necessary frameworks that will bring this broadband plan to life, that would help us execute the plan, achieve the targets that have been set out in them. And some of these frameworks we need a wide range of frameworks. We need to do a wide range of things. We need to have financial incentives to encourage broadband rollout and to drop down the cost of rollouts in rural areas. We need to encourage infrastructure sharing. If more operators can leverage a single infrastructure to deliver high-speed connectivity to people, that will become, there's more competition, services can be delivered more cheaply, and those cost reductions can benefit the end users or people in Nigeria. We also need to have simplified and affordable right-of-way schemes. Right-of-way is a major issue for network providers that are willing to roll out infrastructure, but are not able to because either the schemes are too complicated or they're very expensive. Spectrum is another key area that needs to be worked on. And these are all areas that to a great degree have been identified and really captured within the National Broadband Plan. But we also need to have specific actions that target people that traditionally or systematically have been excluded from using the internet. So we're talking about an internet that works for everyone. So it's not just your typical Nigerians, but what about those people that systematically, through no fault of theirs, they've been excluded? So we're talking about women. The gender gap when it comes to connectivity is still very high, and we need to look at measures that can help bridge us that gap. We also talking about people that are living in rural areas. Through no fault of theirs, they're based in these areas where they might not have access to connectivity. What do we do to ensure that they have access now? We're also talking about people with disabilities. Have we put in place the right tools to enable them also leverage or benefit from the internet like other people? I think if we have to talk very deeply around rural connectivity, the Honorable Minister just mentioned that that's a key area of concern. So we think it's important that government and industry come together to look at ways to roll out innovative technologies, emerging technologies, new business concepts or models. Because without these new innovations or these emerging technologies, if we continue to do or to roll out connectivity the way we've done in the past, I feel like it's still going to be a long time for us to bring people in those rural areas to high-speed connectivity. So it's important that we look at ways of creating incentives or frameworks that will really enable entrepreneurs, innovators to roll out new ways of connecting people effectively, especially those people in the rural areas. And that's where concepts like community networks come in. We've seen them have a very good impact in the past, as well as in other areas where a lot of people in rural communities have been able to come together and roll out or set up community networks. So that's one possible solution, and there's so many. We also need to, if we want to capitalize on this connectivity and ensure that we leverage it for education and build the skills that we all need as a country to fully leverage the internet for our economic activities and socially as well, we need to think about how we roll out education online, and things like zero rating of education content are options that government and private sector players will come together and see how to achieve in Nigeria. And again, if we think about people with disabilities, we don't want to leave them behind. So there are a lot of the tools, a lot of the technology will need to be customized in a manner that these people can easily and well and effectively use the internet to improve their lives. So I'll conclude by saying the internet has tremendous potential to transform all Nigerian lives and all African lives if we think about it. And what the pandemic has shown us is that over the past couple of months, businesses have leveraged the internet to cope. And some of us are even thriving because despite the restrictions that were introduced to manage the pandemic, businesses have been started, people have been working virtually. So we've been able to cope. So it's clear that the internet has a profound positive impact on our lives. And post-pandemic, I think the internet would even have a more significant role to play in the lives of Nigeria. The potential is just so enormous. So it's really time for us to come together as a community, private sector, public sector, government, civil society. Everyone should really come together and put in place those frameworks, make those investments, work together to ensure that internet is accessible or available to everyone, and we can easily all use it positively to improve our day-to-day lives. So I'll stop there. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Next, I want to go to Onka. Can you please share with us your thoughts on that sub-theme, accessibility, actually considering the vulnerable and the disabled, the vulnerable, the women, the children, and the disabled. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you once again, and congratulations to the Nigeria IGF for being able to host such an incredible gathering. I've followed some of the conversations, and it's just I'm just really proud to be part of this moment and where we are in these discussions. So on accessibility, just quickly, the previous speaker, Fargani, really, I support pretty much everything he mentioned. And just to pick up a few highlights from what the minister mentioned is the issue of affordability, and that we are progressively getting better at making sure that we have access to affordable internet. However, I always like to caution on this one. It's true, since we started measuring affordability based on the 1 for 2 target, which is 1 gig of data for no more than 2% average monthly income, starting from 2016, Nigeria has progressively been doing really well at reaching that target of affordability, and actually on average coming now below 2% as an affordable market. However, when we look at income quantiles and we divide the population based on income quantiles, we actually find that the bottom 20% income earners are still spending about 4.82% of their average monthly income on 1 gig of data. And that's extremely expensive. And actually, even the next quintile is at 2.95%. So it's really only the bottom two income quintiles that experience this affordability of the internet. So that really means that there's still a lot of work to be done to make sure that we close this inequality. This becomes very important post-COVID, because yes, while COVID really showed us what we can do with the internet and the access, it also exposed our deep inequalities. And the lesson that we should perhaps take from that is that we have to be intentional and strategic in closing those gaps. We've seen those gaps grow in the area of rural v. urban connectivity issues. So rural connectivity is very, very important for us to continue to focus on and make sure that we are not leaving anyone behind, as well as the digital gender gap gets affected by the issue of affordability, as well as other safety issues and other demand side issues like digital skills to operate online. And that just really brings me to the issue of it's not longer good enough, especially post-COVID, for us to just want people to have access to the internet. They have to have access to meaningful connectivity. And this requires our governments to now begin to look at what is that target for us to be able to say that our people are connected in a meaningful way to the internet. We can start with this 1 gig of data, average 2% per month, because all of us have spent more than 1 gig on just this one call alone. So if we're expecting people to be able to learn, to run businesses online, to engage, to do health monitoring, 1 gig of data per month is not sufficient, and it does not give anyone meaningful access to the internet. So we need to begin to set a target, whether at the country level or support regional bodies to do so, so that we can all agree what it means to be meaningfully connected. We've developed some few items at A4AI, one being the issue of speed of the internet, recommending a minimum of 4 gig of speed for the internet in order for us to get meaningful connectivity, having unlimited access to data, to the internet. 1 gig is just not sufficient, but perhaps for example, if we look at 5 gig in Nigeria right now, like if you wanted to buy a 5 gig data bundle, mobile data bundle in Nigeria, it's at 4.28% of average monthly income. So 1 gig may be affordable, but the amount of data that you need to be meaningfully connected is actually not affordable to anyone at this point. And so we need to really look at those issues, and then the issue of affordable devices as well. Very important. So what I'm seeing is that the investment in infrastructure is important and needs to continue, including the issues of right-of-ways that the minister spoke very well to. However, we are at this point where we need to look at demand-side issues of content, issues of digital skills to be able to function and take full advantage of the internet, because it's no longer about access now. It is about access as well as the experience online that we are able to have, especially when we are now expecting even children to go to school using access to the internet. I will end there, and thank you once again.
Yeah, thank you so much for that contribution. And just to buttress the points you mentioned on the costs on an average Nigerian, I can share my experience during the COVID period last year that we were forced to stay at home. And I realized before, when I buy a 2,000 Naira worth of internet data, I use it for a month. Then I realized that the fact that I'm able to use it for a month is because when I'm going to work, I turn off my data. I only turn it on late in the night. But then I realized just within 3 days, I've exhausted it because I needed to just upscale myself. I was doing some courses online and this, and before I knew what was happening, in 3 days, I've exhausted a month worth of data. That's when I realized, oh, this thing is not a joke. So I can really identify with that cost, because what I budget for a month while going to work every day was not the same thing I used when I was at all through the month. So, and ordinarily the cost I realized was even chopping most of my income, and I had to the point I had just to look for the free options, that's midnight, to make ends meet. Now, talking about still on that, share your thoughts on accessibility. I'm going to Bumi now. I want you to probably explain more, because it's not only for social media that we need internet. Because when you talk about internet, especially for women, for ladies, they think, oh, all they do is just go on social media. But then there are other initiatives that drive the importance of having access. So I want you to talk more about that while you share your points on accessibility. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, and thank you for inviting me. Again, I must also extend my thanks to the Nigerian IGF for having me here, all the way out here in the UK. So Nigerian name by nature, family, but I'm here in the UK. But sort of really interesting, right, to hear sort of like what that experience is that you're all having in terms of data. And as we know, I'm here in the UK, been running my computer all day long, running my phones all day long. I haven't even thought about what data I'm spending or what have you. And this is what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about those gaps that Onika, you mentioned, right? These gaps that are just continuing to enable me to do stuff through the day that somebody, my counterpart, isn't able to do in Nigeria or the and many of the other African countries as well. And Fagani as well, thank you so much for sort of like so wonderfully and articulately pulling together all the different stakeholders that are going to be responsible for fixing this and doing something. So I know I was sort of introduced in various sort of forms, and sort of like previously on the Airband initiative. I actually work in the business development All Up team now, but was really sort of pivotal in some of the work that we did with the regulators, as you know, with respect to trying to get some regulations in space for, at the time, a technology which we've now broadened out to look at various other options, but the sort of TV white space technology, which was supposed to look at how are we going to drive affordable access to the internet in the rural areas, Fagani, as you mentioned. But you know, with that has sort of come some learning. You know, I just remember just running in and out of Abuja every 2 minutes just to get people together and have people talking and going and getting people in to kind of help these conversations. But my thinking about the urgency, and I will get to your point at the moment, the urgency of getting this right, which has been exacerbated, right, and the light shine on it by COVID, just keeps coming up to the fore. So we knew that we needed to have this done and sorted before COVID, right? We've known this for a while. Those figures in terms of the cost of data and what have you were being bandied around for a good while. And my concern when I kind of hear what we're sort of talking about now is that when we have to rely on frameworks and we're relying on policies to make us move forward the way and the speed that we know we need to do. It took a good number of years of coming in and out, not on my dollar, right, on a large corporation's dollar, right, to try to get some type of motion, which we finally got there now in terms of regulation for this affordable piece. But what I'm concerned about now is that if we have to rely on frameworks as opposed to sort of real specific activities in all of the areas that we're talking about, we could go for another 2 or 3 pandemics before we fix it. And I hope not wanting to sound flippant, but you know what I'm talking about. And so also I sort of come to that from this technology understanding piece, okay, Bukala? So that's what we want to talk about now. What are some of these real things I see happening around, but not necessarily in Nigeria, can be instituted, right? We are talking out exactly what are we going to drive in terms of health tech, in terms of education tech as well. And you're right, it is more than have some internet and put X curricula on them and tell the children to sit there. It actually requires us to start being a little bit smart and actually start really thinking if we can get companies like myself and yours, Fagani, to think of technology and say, actually, if the reality of a rural child in a rural village is that they are only going to have internet for half an hour a day, what technologies can we think about now, early on, that means that half an hour is a meaningful half an hour for them to have enabled to get there what they needed? The same thing like with Bukola, you just said about the time you were trying to upskill and how much that was draining from you. Is there a technological way for that upskilling piece that you would have done to have been cut by half? So I'm just kind of giving you this in terms of us having to have a multi-channeled approach to all of this. I don't want to just say we've got to wait for the government to get there. So delighted to hear what the minister had to say. He totally knows what's going on, but we're still within a system there. In the meantime, the rest of us on this call know that the world is going, it's gone on. Positively, what we've done, however, is open up the conversation and the visibility into people, into where we do, into Nigeria, into all of the continents, because people were forced to, right? I remember actually my actual cousin during COVID, she was like, I'm going to Nigeria. She sat there and I was like, well, are you going to do your work there? She goes, yeah, I'm going to show them how I can do my work from here. And she was in a startup here in the UK, and she did go to Nigeria and she did manage to run her work from there. And they were educated by that, number one. Funny enough, it was a financial institution, which we hope will get some understanding to say, actually, this is an investable country where with the right input, we can actually be able to get and benefit from the brains and the sources and everything that we have in Nigeria. So, I mean, there's so much that we can think of, and there's so much ways, but I think if there's anything I want to say here now is that I want us to be kind of really broad-minded, creative, a bit courageous, and what have you, in terms of bringing in some of those solutions pretty quickly. And being careful about sort of waiting for step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, then we can do it, right? Because that's when we kind of are in a bit of quicksand there. But I want to chat to all of you when we've all finished our little one pieces and see if we can.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Now I want to go to Dr. Adewale Dokun. Are you there? Yes, I want to, based on your own line of expertise, community capacity building. Now I want to ask this issue of access, internet access, I want to talk from that angle of capacity building. How can we make internet accessible for all in Nigeria? Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. I hope you are hearing me.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Maybe it's going to be a bit practical from my side because I am actually in transit. So if for any reason you find me that I'm breaking off or I disappeared, maybe that is going to be a practical way to demonstrate availability and kind of
a reality.
Yeah, and coupled with the fact that I'm in Kaduna State and the government is actually shutting down networks because of security issues, so I can break off anytime, really. Having said that, I want to say a very big thank you to NIGF for having me. Like all the other speakers have said, COVID has brought to the fore quite a number of realities that probably Nigerians need to begin to face very squarely. I'm involved in a lot of capacity building. I also teach in the university, and beyond just talking about availability, like all the other speakers have said, availability is important, affordability is important. You will also discover that there is a lot of gap in knowledge when it comes to the use of the internet itself. So in some places where it is actually available, affordability is really a no issue in Nigeria. Affordability is not there. People really can, even except the rich, and the rich really, if they are using the internet access for their day-to-day activities, they will also complain that it's expensive. Probably the people that will not complain about the cost of internet may just be the people that are using it on government. They are government workers, so it's just available for free in their workplaces. Outside that, for almost everybody in Nigeria, it's still very expensive, and the attendant costs for telecos can go a long way explaining why internet access is going to be expensive. Now, when we talk about the education system, you will discover that because of COVID, quite a number of states or our educational institutions has lost at least one academic session, basically because even for them that have the internet access available, the knowledge on what to do, how to do, what is there for them to access, what do they even use data internet access for, it's now very paramount, and it becomes something that is very important for everybody to begin to look at. Government needs to probably become a bit more intentional about this, the use of internet and whatsoever you have on the internet. The content itself are really not there as much as possible, and the people that need to use. Take for instance, if you want to go into the rural communities, schools in the rural communities, even if they have the internet access, who is going to use it? What would they use it for? Which content are they accessing? Who's going to train them on how to use? The teachers themselves, do they know how to use? There are quite a number of issues that surrounds the use of internet. Unfortunately, or probably fortunately or unfortunately, in this age, there is really no other way. Sincerely, we are just facing the reality now that there is no other way. The way to go, really, I heard the last speaker saying that we may need to do with another 2 or 3 pandemics, and if that should happen, what really is the fate of the young Nigerians that need to learn? So, despite the fact that people may not be able to go to physical places for learning, there has to be a very intentional effort to ensure that teaching and learning does not stop, even if we cannot gather in a place physically. Even the NIGF 2-3 years ago, I'm sure somebody will say, no, this cannot be possible. Everybody needs to gather in one place. So, there are quite a number of things that needs to be put in place beyond. I hope you are still hearing me. I'm still a bit stable. I'm still somewhere
yes, we can hear you. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I may not be a bit coherent because I'm actually driving. I'm on the road. So there are quite a number of things that we need to look into. So if we put a lot of energy into ensuring availability, I see the government, I heard Virginia talking about the National Broadband Plan, which is very, very ambitious, really. I heard the government talking about it. I've seen the broader plan. So even if the infrastructure is there, if this internet is available even in the internet, in the hinterlands, in the rural areas, how affordable is it going to be? Most of the issues of taking this internet, the last miles, even into the rural areas, is investment by the private sector. The incentives need to get there to ensure that if this facility is going to be available, even in the rural areas, people in the rural areas can afford it. At the main session, I also listened to some of the speakers, especially Pierre, talking about this thing also being available in our local languages. An average local person, illiterate person who needs to use the internet, how will the person use the internet? So capacity building comes very handy in all this. It becomes very important to prepare our people, to train them, prepare them, and ensure that whenever this facility comes, they are able to use. It's also important for probably the technical people to be trained to ensure that the one that is available, we can make a maximum use of it without wasting it. Because people do a lot of things on the internet that amounts to wastage, and it's not because they want to waste, it's simply because they don't know. So a lot of training and capacity building needs to come into it. I think I should stop there for now. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those insights. Now, talking about community network, I want to go to Mr. Obiora. I hope you're on this call. Okay, yes, you are. Now, I want to ask, still telling us about your insights into accessibility, internet that works for all. Now, I want you to look at it from the angle of satellite technologies. How can this be made possible for us from this angle of white spaces, satellite text that provides better access? Thank you.
Thank you, Bukola, NIGF for the invitation to this forum. My name is Nnamdi Obiora. I work with Nigerian Communication Satellite. I'm the group head of the new subsidiary company of NigeConsat, Satellite Broadband and Broadcasting Company. So when we talk about access to the rural areas and unserved and underserved areas, the first thing that comes to mind is that why do private sector funds shy away from rural communities in Nigeria? Or not just in Nigeria, everywhere globally. So why is that? Because one major thing is that where the average revenue per user, which is called the ARPU, is low, you find out that private sector funding is a big scarce in those areas. Then if you look at areas where the return on investment is low, private sector funding runs away from it. So nobody tries to push people to move to Lagos or to Port Harcourt or to Onitsha or to any other place where the population and the affordability is key. You find out that those key cities in Nigeria are fully covered. As the minister let us know, the policy on the 5G rollout is out already. And before you know it, most of those key cities are still going to be the beneficiaries of the 5G network rollout. Then the key question is that why is there still a big gap in terms of service availability across Nigeria? Then explain what the USPF has done in the past years about service spread in the country. You find out that about 61% of Nigerian landmass is currently undercovered. And if you look at the underserved and unserved communities in Nigeria, from the sample document provided by USPF, you find out that about 31 million Nigerians do not have any form of connectivity. Then you wonder why it is so. Then if you look at it, that the landmass of Nigeria as it is does not have any form of connectivity. And then even the ones that are connected, about 50% of the people living in rural areas do not have any form of 3G or 4G. Some of them at best just have 2G network coverage. And then if you look at all these statistics and the implications of these statistics, one thing it tells you is that even for the urban areas that are covered by the mobile network operators, one of the major issues they have too is that most of the infrastructure that is used in connecting the end users are still microwave based. There are no fiber termination to most of the cell towers. Some of the tower companies in the urban areas, in semi-urban areas, and in most of the places that are covered as of today.
Please go ahead. I think it's a technical
Okay,
thing.
yeah. So this points us to one factor. It's not possible today as Nigeria, with the infrastructure we have in Nigeria today, to connect the rural communities with wired infrastructure. Mark my word, wired infrastructure. Even a country as like UK, for example, we find out that the whole country is not fully covered by fiber optic cable. There are still some pockets of counties and areas that are not fully covered by fiber optic. Then coming to third world countries like Nigeria and other African countries, it becomes a really big issue. And then where is the way out, and what do we do in order for us to be able, because one thing we agreed today is that data access should be a right, just like human rights. And then for us to interconnect about these 31 million people, I mean, what do we do about it? The best, or if we want a quick win solution to this, the ubiquitous network we can use to have access to cover all the people living in rural communities in Nigeria, underserved communities and unserved communities, and even the challenging communities with challenging terrains. You find out that communication satellite technology is one of the key things you have to use in that regard. And then what we have done in NIGECONSAT is that if you look at the Nigerian National Broadband Plan, which is about the available policy plan documents, explain how Nigeria plans to bring data connectivity to these communities. You find out that NIGECONSAT is one of the companies that are listed to play a key role in doing that using the assets of the Nigerian satellite. It may interest you to know that Nigerian Communication Satellite has a satellite with name NIGECONSAT 1R, which has coverage over, for the broadband, it has coverage over the entire West Africa. And then on their KA band, you have coverage over South Africa, over Europe and Nigeria. And then on the L band, they have a global beam across Africa. And then on the C band, the service coverage extends from West Africa to eastern part of Africa. And then on the KU2 beam, we have coverage extending from part of West Africa, Central Africa, and down to some countries in the Southern Africa as well. So what it tells you is that covering Nigeria regarding the upstream infrastructure is not the major problem. Now, the major problem we have is the end user accessibility networks. How do we get it to the rural communities? How do we get this network to the end users at areas that are needed? So the major thing, like we said, is that if private sector funding, the utilization at those areas are what the return on investment, there wouldn't be a challenge. But because of the way it is, you find out that there are key considerations for you to move into these key markets. First is the market segment. What kind of market segment do you hope to attract? And then analyzing the indices of Nigerian rural areas and underserved communities, you find out that you have to structure it in such a way that it goes from the upstream sector to end users. So retail will be the best factor to do that. Then you look at financing model. What financing model should you adopt? We know that if it's attractive to the private sector funding, we would have had it in that sector. But we know that this is going to be an interventionist program, which of course, the universal service provision funding, which is found in USPF and ICT funding, which NIPDA manages part of it, has been trying to do interventionist program across Nigeria in those areas. But have they been successful? Then it moves us to another thing about management. How do you hope to manage these networks? So is it going to be government managed? Is it going to be community-based managed? And then you look at the revenue stream of it. Is it going to be done, the development financial institutions, are they going to come in? And the revenue model, is it going to be under subsidy or all these? These are all the things Niger Consult, through its subsidiary company as well, has put together and came up with solution to the Nigerian National Broadband Plan Committee managed by BISC on the best way forward to make sure that this solution gets to the hinterlands in Nigeria. And one of them, we've been in this sector for a number of years. We understand the challenges of it because number one, if you move to the rural areas, you are offering broadband. Some of them don't understand how this affects their lives. So you have to find a way. When you are using some fashionable terms like e-learning, some of these ones, knowing the dynamics of the communities that you are dealing with. So one of the things we did is that number one, power is their challenge. Most of these communities do not have any form of electricity. Then how do you deploy technological solutions to them? How do you power it? So we find out that you have to create something that is nimble, green energy power initiative, and then find a way that the solution is tailored to the everyday life of the people living in those communities. How do they have access to funding, for example? You know the way Nigeria is structured. If you're living in rural area, for example,
Hello, I think I lost Obiora there.
You have to, some of them have children that will register for national examinations like WAEC, NECO, JAM, and other things. You have to find a way to tie broadband to their daily needs. And there are so many other ways we have considered to bring a nimble solution to the rural area. And some of these things we've considered and put under consideration. And they are receiving attention as we speak, because Niger Consult is mandated through the National Broadband Plan 2020 to 2025 to at least provide 3,000 terminals in most underserved communities. So we are working with all the relevant stakeholders. The source of funding for us to do this, because the budgetary allocation for it directly to Niger Consult is not there. So we are exploring options in terms of development financing institution. We are exploring options from universal service provision funding. We are equally exploring solutions from partnership with some private sector driven economy and other things in order to work together with us in order to ensure that by the expiry of this in 2025, not just that we are going to make sure that they have access centers at least, but the price of delivery of this service will be reduced, and ensuring too that one of the major things, which is OPEX, is highly reduced.
Thank you. Permit me to break in there. Thank you so much for all those insights on what the government is putting into place to make the internet accessible to the rural areas. But then I want to go back to you, Fragani. You talked during your insight session, you talked about community networks. And just now looking at what Onika posted, sorry about the background noise, it's raining heavily here. I hope you can still hear me clearly.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Now, I want you to talk briefly more on how community networks can help in this area. Because if you keep waiting for the government to put things in place, I don't know how long we'll have to wait. So how can the community take over in this area? Thank you.
Yes, so I think the challenge that has resulted in traditional networks not being rolled out in rural areas is the business case. So usually the return on investment, especially if you're trying to roll out a massive traditional network, the return on investment you get in rural areas isn't substantive and doesn't make business sense for most infrastructure service providers. But what community networks do is that like the community or a group of people is able to come together and set up these networks themselves. And by setting up these networks, you take out that issue of the business case not making sense, because this is like a bottoms up approach. A number of villages or a community has come together, they've pulled together the funding, or they've gotten a grant from someone, or gotten some financing somewhere to set up a simple network that would provide their basic connectivity needs. And I think over the years, the Internet Society is one of those organizations that has been championing the rollout of community networks. And again, they've been quite impactful in getting some of these communities that seem to have been abandoned, getting those communities connected to the internet. But having said that, we still need the government to play its part, because getting that funding, setting up the community network, and maintaining that network still requires some good degree of financing. And yes, it might not be as substantive as an MTN rolling out a 4G network across the entire rural area, but it's still substantive in terms of financing. So government still needs to come in and provide incentives to enable those people, those entrepreneurs, or those communities that want to set up those sort of networks, to their ability to set that up, particularly on the financing side. So incentives like equipment import duty, for instance. So such duties are quite substantive. So if they're waived, that empowers those community networks some more. If you also have things like tax breaks, so they wouldn't need to pay for any taxes from any revenues that are generated from operating that network, and those revenues can now be reinvested to upgrade and maintain those networks. We also have financial incentives where they might be able to tap into the Universal Service Fund to fund obtaining equipment or maintaining equipment. You would also have things like license fee exemptions. A lot of our countries require you to get a license, and that comes with a fee that you have to pay for you to actually set up these networks. So what if the government comes in and sets up a license framework that doesn't require any fee, or for them to even use the spectrum, they don't need to pay high spectrum fees. So these are some of the things that, yes, the community networks can make a difference. But I still think you need government support and government buy-in. Bumi, I take your point. Like, generally, policy making tends to lack innovation, and it's a slow process. But but the reality is, with all the innovations that are happening, most governments, and I think including the Nigerian government, most governments across the world wouldn't allow innovators, entrepreneurs just come in and set up shop. So they will still need to have some sort of oversight. So we need to come to a place where there's a framework that enables companies, innovations, entrepreneurs to come in and set up very quickly, or roll out these technologies of innovations very quickly, so that we don't lag behind and we have to wait on another 2-3 pandemics. I take your point. It's a slow process, but if we're able to get government to really move quickly, hopefully we wouldn't have to wait for another 2 or 3 pandemics. But yeah,
I really hope that as well.
Yeah, Bumi, I want to come in at that point. Please,
Yeah,
I want
sure.
Yeah, I want to see,
Yeah.
because I know you were smiling when we were talking about still going back to the government. You are still expecting it to be something. But can you just tell me, because is this like a recommendation? I'm sure the recording, somebody will listen to it in government. Now, how can the community itself, or the people that are affected, the citizens now, how can we actually step in without actually waiting forever for the government to conclude their policy, conclude their committee discussions, and then make this accessible to us? How can we come in, considering community network, or what other area can private sector move in and bail us out, not expecting commercial returns? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And it's so funny. Me and Fagani and the whole crew are going to sit down one day and just sort it out. I can't wait for that. And absolutely sort of like not mixing the government and just like, yeah, we don't need you. Let's do it ourselves. Right. No, of course, we need that framework. We need that we need the blessing and everything else that comes with that. So yeah, we are totally aligned with that. I think what I'm suggesting, and it kind of goes to the point. I love the way that Obira, I hope I said it right. Obiora, please forgive me. I hope it said it right. I love the way that he kind of broke down some of the things that needed to be done, and straight away. And as we talked about the community network, I just remembered one thing I thought was kind of lacking when actually we were in a position where there was a bit of funding, there was some help and all the rest of it. And that was, and it's going to sound really basic, just some program and project management, right, on the ground, right? And that's kind of where I see, and Fagani, please jump in as well. But I'm just thinking, in terms of even those community networks and all the things that you've broken out there, like someone who's going to get their head around the regulation, get their head around the licensing, get their head around really what is going to be the final deliverable, a school, a health center, and what have you. Who's actually orchestrating that? And I always remember thinking, during the work that I did out there, it's like, oh, where's our crack project manager? Where is the person that or the people or the organization that is truly going to orchestrate all that and bring together what the good, the bad, this is broken, and really have that level of orchestration and execution, and at that point some acceleration, right, around what the end point is. So, and when we kind of talk about being laser focused in the things that we want and should get in, I definitely think, and I know it sounds basic, like if everybody goes in Nigeria and you'd go, okay, the course for the year is like crack project management, program management, right? How to execute, get from A to B, and what have you. I think that's going to really do some great work there. And I also think this whole bottoms up approach is, it feels like it's the way, because it's just like, it's the bottom up approach who are passionate and are truly living what the experience is. They know what's got to be broken, that they know what's broken and they know what needs to be fixed. So I do like this whole interventionist type thinking, right, where we're empowering those that know how to do it and move forward. We have this conversation, right, in the farming community. I'm doing some work on agri-tech at the moment, and I'm looking at kind of like the numbers and figures, and the amount of, the whole idea around the Nigerian farm community is just like the disparate small farming networks that actually, once brought together in these kind of large farming corporations, then have some power behind them to do some amazing stuff, which from a technology perspective can be precision farming, all the stuff to get better yields and what have you. But it's this whole idea of coming together of the kind of ground force and what have you. And I know it sounds all kind of like the dream, but it's actually not. It's the power. Right, it's kind of the power.
Thank you very much. So
I can't hear you, dear.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can now, yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now I want to go back to Onika. Onika, I want you to video focus on the vulnerable and the women. I want you to talk briefly on what strategies exactly can help these people to overcome these income challenges when it comes to debt. Because ordinarily, a typical woman would think twice before paying so much for data when there are other things that actually need our phone. And you know, for the man can overlook some things, you attend to that, but no, an ordinary woman will find it difficult. Now, what are the probably the frameworks or the strategies that work in other places to bring more women, to bring access to more women, and how we can adapt it in Nigeria that will help us? Because actually most of the remote locations, even in the urban, not all women can afford. So how can this help, and some actual strategies that will help us? Thank you.
Okay, so I think just a quick recap. I think for me, these inequalities, it's really important for us to understand that these inequalities are not unique to online. They exist because we are unequal. We are societies that are unequal, right? There is inequality within society. So it is not by accident that once again online, it is women that are left behind. It's because we have not addressed the systemic inequalities due to patriarchy and other factors that continuously leave women behind. So one of the things actually that I'm very proud of that came out of the first Africa Summit on Women and Girls in Technology, which was held in 2016 in Ghana, and actually I think Nigeria was the highest, we had the highest number of representatives from Nigeria, was the REACT framework. And what the REACT framework seeks to do is to work towards mainstreaming gender in ICT policy. I mean, we can do this through programs here and there, but I think the importance of public policy is to ensure sustainability of these plans. We have to be intentional about closing these gaps, because these gaps didn't just create themselves, they didn't just happen. You know, so we have to be just as strategic and intentional in seeking to close them. So what the REACT framework does is that it focuses us on responding to gender inequalities and mainstreaming gender and ICT policy through focusing on rights as the first item. So digital rights, human rights, and having a rights-based focus on public policy for technology. And that will then force us to also look at women's rights around that as well. So, and the E on the REACT framework is for education. One of the things that we found in our women's rights online research is the fact that there is inequity in education, which also includes inequity in digital education naturally, and that we need to invest in digital education for girls. That doesn't necessarily mean that, because I know the Boys Club, that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't teach boys. It just simply means that we recognize that there is a disparity and that girls are being left behind, and that we put forth more efforts to ensure that we bring in more girls. And if we, and we actually are intentional in our policy directives around making sure that girls are part of these initiatives and girls are being brought along to ensure their success in STEM or STEAM, as I like to call it, because I think that as much as focus on science and technology is important, we need to also remember that there's value in humanities, arts and humanities, in advancing technology and innovation. So the A is for access and affordability, which is the topic of today. So when we look at even the penetration rates, user rates, we need to begin to collect gender disaggregated data so we can better understand how women and girls are affected. And we can better plan as well. So when we are building a digital center, for example, in a rural area, it's important for us to make sure that women are part of that planning so that we don't find ourselves like what has happened in some communities where they've built these centers, but women are not going because the place is too far or the place is not safe for them to be able to go and participate. And then so the REACT, we are on access. C is for content, relevant content. Relevant content, that's been talked about today a lot. It's really important that we are encouraging people to go online and to do work online, and that we must have diverse and relevant content for them. Predominantly, a majority of the information currently online, including that accessed from within this region, is written in English. How many of the population of the people that we want to get online are actually English speakers, let alone can read and comprehend fully in English? Internet is giving us an opportunity for us to also develop content in our languages, develop content that's relevant, and develop content that's really empowering for communities. But also, how do we, I look at Nigeria as a really good example that the digital economy and Nigeria's beautiful storytelling should really, I want to see a future of our digital economies that feature a strong presence of Nigeria's arts and culture. As great content producers, it's beginning to happen, but I believe that it can happen at an even broader scale when we enable those industries and content developers to be able to be online, so that we are not just there to consume, but Africans are able to be online to actually also contribute and as innovators of this content that we seek. And the last one is targets. And for me, targets are really important, because we can keep talking about getting everyone online, but unless we set very clear policy targets and directives, we're not going too far with that. The document I just shared on the rural broadband connectivity framework, one of the things that we found quite important with having these kinds of policy documents and targets put in place is that it's not going to take one sector in order for us to get the kind of access that we want for everyone. There is a role for civil society, there's a role for government, there's a role for private sector. It's going to take multi-stakeholder partnerships in order to get us there. And there's a role for development funders as well in this too. So being able to have these frameworks and these policy directives also helps in terms of being able to attract the necessary investments into the country for that. We look at Nigeria's National Broadband Plan now, it's actually not only really helps Nigeria in its ranking on the affordability index, but certainly will go a long way in terms of the attracting the kinds of investments that Nigeria needs for infrastructure to increase connectivity and access for everyone. So once again, on the digital gender gap, intention. We have to go in all the time wanting to close the gap. One of the things that I love to do when I go to these kinds of forums is to look at even who is speaking. Earlier this morning, I was one woman in a panel of 6-7 speakers. So also being intentional about things as simple as little as those, because when young girls tune in, they begin to dissociate the notion that technology and tech policy is only for men, but that I tuned into this forum and I saw Bunmi speaking on these issues, and therefore I, as a young girl in Nigeria, can eventually be able to work in this kind of area and do this kind of work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Because of our time, I quickly want to read what we have in the chat. And I look forward to any one of us, the panelists, to please answer to it. Now, the first comment from Wilson Onoha says, speaking about accessibility, I was wondering if we can look at the issue of stable electricity. A good majority of Nigerians can't boast of access to a stable electricity. This can be a challenge, especially when one needs to work real time. My point, can we push for the accessibility to stable electricity, as I believe it is a backbone for any economy to thrive? So who among our panelists would love to pick that? Do I invite Obiora? Obiora, can you please answer that?
Okay, thank you
Thank
for
you.
inviting me once more. And I think Wilson has just stated the truth, and it's what it is in Nigeria. And then sometimes when you talk about access to space or having satellites, investing in technological infrastructure and other things, the key question is, the key thing that drive everything we do today, the technology, it remains power. So what do we do about it? So Nigeria, I think overall, we've learned how to adapt. We've learned how to be our own PHCN. We've learned how to use a green energy solution in our houses in order to have bridge the gap that government is unable to provide. And then it becomes more challenging when you go to the rural areas, when you start to talk about accessibility for the rural communities and other things. So in one of our designs and what we did is actually to create what we call a charging bay in one of our community access solutions, which we call the rural ICT kiosk, RICS. So what we did in that design was to create, use solar power solution, and then create a charging base such that rural communities will have a center where they can, especially those rural, deep rural communities without any form of electricity, should have a place they can come to charge their access devices, the common household items, because the idea is to tie broadband to their daily needs. Even charge common household items like rechargeable lanterns and other things. And then we create like a solar powered light around the rural ICT kiosk that can provide a little bit of illumination at night, creating like something like a city center lighting the effect for those rural communities or people living in vulnerable conditions in Nigeria. Okay, so these are some of the plans we've tabled to the towards the managers of the Nigerian National Broadband for implementation.
Okay, I think you might still be able to answer this question. That's from Alaya Kawada. The question is, what incentives can be put in place to foster telecom companies to extend more of their infrastructures to rural areas or communities to promote access?
Like I said,
that would be a question for the government.
Yeah, it's still going to be a difficult issue because private sector funding is private sector funding. Those funds are not free. Once you have to channel these funds, there is a cost for funding itself. So once you want to channel it to where the ROI is very low or the ARPU is not there, they shy away, and these funds are not going to come because they have a cost for acquiring those funds. So the only way we are looking at, and one of the things we are doing in order to ensure that the access is universal, is to key into universal service provision funding to look more for grants and other money that could come from developmental financial institutions around the world, and then work with government to provide interventionist funding in order to power the rural communities. At this point, these are the key areas we are working with our Honorable Minister and all the major stakeholders to ensure that if we can get funding from these areas and channel them into where they are needed, and then making sure that the OPEX for the running of network services are reduced. And then,
thank you very much. Just
may I jump in?
Yeah, wait, Bumi, before you jump in, I want you to contribute to that and also give your last recommendation, just the last statement on that.
Yeah,
so just wrap this up that way. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, I thank you. I love jumping on what everybody else is saying, so it's great. What I did want to say, and also in answer to the question, is actually what I'm finding is resonating here is being able to show and demonstrate the long term. And I say it's not even potential, because as far as I'm concerned, it's there already, but the long-term view and the long-term potential and the numbers and data around what could be. So what I'm trying to say is that, and I don't have them to hand now, you know, the data which we're sharing internally in terms of sort of the demographic, right? Like half of the world's population is going to be X age within our region. So although from a direct immediate perspective, that ROI that we're talking about there may not come to pass, when we're talking about in 10 years time, when actually the world's middle class is sitting here in the country, it's time to start doing it, and it's time to start thinking about it. And then you start talking about it from economic and investment terms, which is you get in there at the early stage. So that's the kind of narrative that we need to be talking to when we're talking about, again, the telecom company, the investors and such like, and what have you. And very quickly, in terms of sort of female and the women and the gender and the pay gap, it's global. Right, that again, the data is out there in terms of the percentage that venture capitalists are putting into female-led companies, as opposed to those that are not female-led companies, much lower investment rate. Where we're seeing there is huge is where the women are part of those venture capitalists, VCs, where the women are the ones who are dictating where investments are going. They are ensuring that they're going to women founders. So it's all of this, and it goes back to this kind of ground roots, do it as much as yourself kind of idea. So all I can say is that it's great that we've had this conversation. It's great that we're having these narratives. I think I want us to have like the courage to talk about where we can and are and actually will go. And then that way, the numbers, the figures, the potential start to be real and more attractive for those who we need to come in and do some helping hands. But thank you so much. It's been great being amongst these honorable speakers. Please invite me next time, kind of in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Now to you, Onuka. Your final statement with us that you can take away?
Yes, certainly. I think for me, it's really, I just want to emphasize the importance of continuing to work at affordability, especially given the income inequalities that exist. That it's really important for us to recognize that 60% of Nigerians still cannot afford access to the internet, and that's really critical. And lastly, on the issue of community networks, things don't just happen by themselves. They happen because we are intentional and we want them to succeed and be well for us. And so it's important to support, it's important for government to create an enabling environment for community networks to be successful. And that is beginning to really think around how spectrum is made available for community networks and licensing regimes that are suitable and could enable community networks. They are a very different type of income and revenue type approach where users are basically shareholders and providing their network for themselves. And it's really critical that where private sector has told us it was economically not viable for them to service those areas, that we therefore not see pushback from the same sector against licensing and spectrum release to community networks. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Over to you, Fagani.
Thank you, Bukola. I think my final comments will just be to echo what everybody else has said, and I'll just conclude by saying, for us, if we actually need to get everyone in Nigeria access to the internet and get them to benefit from the internet, we need the right mix of policy, investments, innovative technologies, and business models, and we need to come together to put all of this in place. And if we don't, we wouldn't be at the next Nigeria IGF, we'll still be in the same place. So we need to come together as a community, work very closely with government and all other stakeholders to put in place this right mixture of policy frameworks, investments, and ensuring that innovative solutions and business models can easily be rolled out across.
Yeah, so apologies for what happened earlier. Can you still hear me? Okay,
yes,
okay, thank you. Yeah, so now I want to go to, we are rounding up now. So I want to go, Fagani, are you through with your
Yes, I'm done.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I'd love to go to Dr. Adedokun. Are you there? Is he still with us? If not, can I go to Obiora? Give us your closing statement. Thank
you very much again, Bukola, for us, we will be very glad if we have to do all we can to extend the broadband services to the most difficult areas in Nigeria, not just Nigeria, West Africa, because our broadband access covers the entire West Africa. So that will be our happiness.
Thank you very much. Dr. Adedokunmu is off this call. So in conclusion, I want to say a big thank you to every one of us that joined this meeting, especially to the very end. And like we all heard, we have to be intentional in everything we do concerning bringing access to everyone in Nigeria. The government has to be intentional. The citizens have to be intentional in their demand and also in strategic partnerships. We don't wait for government alone. We strategize with private sectors in our locality. We plan towards community network, we work towards it. Then capacity building, we encourage capacity building. We encourage local content, because these are the things that will help us to make the internet not only accessible, but meaningful. Because if all we see when people connect from the rural area is the Western world and nothing that resonates with them, then it's of no use. So I hope that we, the government, and everyone that is here on this call will take this as a take home from this session. And so once again, I want to thank every one of us that stayed with us to the very end of this call. And special thanks to all our panelists. Thank you so much. You made it worthwhile in spite of infringing so much on your time. We are grateful and we look forward to future collaborations on events like this. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bumi Durowoju. Thank you, Onika. Thank you, Fragani. Thank you, Dr. Adedokunmu. Thank you, Obiora. Looking forward to seeing more of you in future events. Thank you so much. I think we can go back to the main room now. We can exit the breakout and go back to the main room.